Vancouver.mediaco.ca
has not proven to me, and many of us, that we can trust you and your word. You have not earned our trust. You have changed midstream. You have backed down on commitments made that put you in the office in the first place. Your decision of the planning committee is good, pushing through a proposal that is for a community which is part of a larger community designated for a planning process is short-sighted at best and preferential at its worst. All planning should be inclusive of the whole, as they are interdependent parts. Some members of the Chinese community feel that it is unfair, and I understand their frustration. However, changes to any part of the downtown east side affect the whole community. In my humble opinion, it is unfortunate that this process happened the way it did, because I do not hear that there was input by members of the community who should also have a voice in decision-making about their community.
You're here.
I would have gladly participated in this process if I had known that. Sadly, I can find no advantages for the low-income community of the downtown east side in this process. There's no prerequisite percentage housing. There's no advantage and talk of a one-for-one replacement. If it goes up, where is their implementation for more housing for low-income and homeless people in this process? First of all, I do not believe in terms low impact and medium impact. Impact is impact. There are many flags and indicators of the impact felt by the gentrification that has already taken place. And I can personally testify to racist remarks that I have experienced personally. And I also did what I call the downtown east side litmus test. I dressed the way I normally dress, and I dressed down like I was still homeless. And I can tell you that that test proves to me not only about attitudinal shift in our community because of gentrification. I can't tell you how rude people were to me when I had holes in my shirts and a dirty face and my hair was all over the place. I walked down that street, the very same street, the next day, dressed like I am now, and it was a whole different world. So the visual is true. Am I close? Okay.
You're over your time, and you've got a question coming too.
Okay, so I'll be really quick. The final, so the traditional Chinese grandmothers that I see almost every day will not be there because the shops will have closed down. If we think that there won't be a change in this, then we are fooling ourselves, because the landowners will raise the rents. The social clubs that bring the Chinese men to my area will not be there because of development speculation and speculators who will raise rents to get them out of there. The choice is yours. You can be true leaders and proactively make decisions that prevent this outcome with one that honors the Chinatown history with courageous and conscientious steps to move forward, or you can fold and 3 years from now mourn the loss of a vital community, much like Hogan's Alley. Thank you for allowing me to
My name is Claudia Lee. I'm an environmental, advocate, you can call me, in Vancouver. But the identity that I identify myself with the most is my Chinese heritage. I'm a first-generation Chinese Canadian. My parents are immigrants from Hong Kong, but my grandma actually brought me up most of my life. We lived in Richmond when I was a kid. Because my parents were immigrants, they had very little and had to work most of the time, so my grandma took care of me and my little sister. And I remember she used to carry me on her back on this piece of cloth sling from this piece of fabric that she salvaged in Hong Kong. And she used to take me down to Chinatown on her back every single week on the bus. And I remember she used to take me to the community centers where she would teach me how to play mahjong. And I loved the sound of the mahjong tiles clicking. She'd take me down the Chinatown streets to pick up groceries, and I can still smell like char siu and bok choy and the fresh ginger in the open markets. And she even took me to those crappy Chinese operas, which I still don't know how to appreciate to this very day. So I never really understood why she would, do all that work to carry me on her back into Chinatown every week to buy groceries and play mahjong. She could do that at home, right? 2 years ago, my grandma passed away, and I've been going back to Chinatown a lot more on my own, and buying pineapple buns at Goldstone Bakery and getting some gailan on Kiefer Street. I guess I go back there because I miss her a lot. She was a big part of my life, and I think about her a lot when I go into Chinatown, and I think I finally realized why she did that, why she would come home, or she'd take the time to carry all these bags of groceries with me on her back all the way home on this bus. It's because she felt a sense of community. It's because she felt a sense of belonging, and because the people there spoke her language, she could get the things she wanted at a price she could afford. And now I see that sense of community and all those things being threatened now. As you guys know, there's over 1,000 low-income residents in Chinatown. Many of them are seniors and elderly women. And as people previously mentioned, most of them don't know what's going on. And a lot of them that I've spoken to are opposed to these heights. And I mean, we all know these 12 to 50-story buildings are going to push out these low-income residents and the small businesses that depend on these low-income residents. And I want Chinatown to be great. And I guess the question is, if we're going to revitalize Chinatown, revitalize it for who? Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember the last time there was a market trend where people who could afford $500,000 condos bought chicken feet and pig's tongue. So I'm a volunteer with Carnegie Community Action Project, and I've talked to a lot of these Chinatown seniors, elderly women, most of them who are pretty afraid of coming out and speaking on their own because they're already so marginalized. And so I'm humbly here to speak on their behalf. The literal translation of Chinatown is, Chinatown is Tongyingai, and in the translation is Cantonese People Street. And I'm hoping that the Cantonese people that live on these streets will be taken care of because they're right now the most vulnerable. I think this is an amazing opportunity to create a thriving and resilient community that addresses the need of the people who live in Chinatown, and we can keep the Cantonese streets Cantonese because there's Cantonese people there. I mean, I know that, times are changing and things need to happen, things need to move, but a wise man once told me, it's not about the destination you get to, but the process in which you take to get there. And I think we should put that process back into this process and include Chinatown in the local area plan. Thank you.
I would like to speak in support of the effort that this low-income community is making to preserve its survival. I respect the values that these ideas and efforts represent and recognize the powerful cultural and economic forces that they are attempting to resist. The majority of the Vancouver community, while living in far superior accommodation and material abundance, is constantly encouraged to strive for more, bigger, newer, better. This insatiable, market-driven appetite is consuming the planet. The appetite for energy which it stimulates is at this moment generating a rather severe case of global indigestion, if not malignant, depopulating cancer. Perhaps this is a time to reflect on where our high-rise development lifestyles are taking us. Indisputable evidence of the consequences of gentrification on low-income communities can be provided by any number of local academics who have already petitioned Council in opposition to the high-rises under consideration. The low-income community lives in scarcity. They know how to do more with less. However, when they attempt to recycle often discarded used goods among themselves on the street, the act is criminalized. The community is a consequence of the kind of organizing to resist the towers in question at this hearing is currently running a weekly open street market. These organizing efforts advocate and actualize values of tolerance for those dispossessed by drugs, alcohol, disease, injury, racial or ethnic discrimination, and typically economic disadvantage as a cause or consequence of these conditions. The residents know that the influx of new, affluent, high-rise occupants will create even more resistance to the kind of innovations that low-income folks want to explore in order to make their community healthier and oriented to their needs. They take note of the middle-class panic generalized by high-rise moral entrepreneurs against homeless shelters under the Grenville Street bridges. This low-income, poorly housed, and resourced community carries the water for those of us in Vancouver and beyond who will not tolerate the presence of fellow human beings, sometimes family members, who have been caught up in these destructive engagements or displayed the damage wrought by cultural destruction, criminalization, discrimination, or previous economic disadvantage. This community suffers the greatest negative consequence of a prohibition black market generating drug enforcement policy that ironically emerged as a result of various governments blaming economically driven race riots in this very community a century ago on drug use. Whether espoused by Canadian governments or Muammar Gaddafi, an illusion-producing explanation which excludes an appreciation of the role that economic and political interests play in both cases. The police have been herding drug dealers and drug users up and down Hastings Street for 100 years. The resulting black market, which turns penny costs into dollar profits, drains substantial portions of the limited available financial resources that might otherwise be used more effectively by this community. It criminalizes users, recruits them as dealers, promotes violence, and thereby further destabilizes and disables the community and its members. Competent research, which documents these processes, may be found among 500 peer-reviewed articles provided by whyprohibition.ca. This low-income community hosts one of the few harm reduction facilities in Canada and is organizing the proposed transformations in drug policy and practices to rectify the damage done by current prohibition enforcement activities. There are many more examples of the ways in which the downtown east side does service both for its members and for the broader Vancouver community. The democratically elected Downtown Eastside Neighborhood Council is emergent from a low-income community that is respectful of First Nations people and culture that occupied this very land in this neighborhood for thousands of years. People who were dispossessed by the technological and economic weaponry of an acquisitive civilization, now represented by the march of megaliths that threaten to dispossess them again, along with other low-income residents of this land. These community groups stand against forces of market-driven, profit-seeking values which serve the interest of the already excessively wealthy development class. They do this in the face... I'd like to do that.
Okay.
They do this in the face of the consumerist lifestyle in opposition to a vastly resource development machine. I can skip on, but finally, each of us, councils and other citizens alike, makes a decision, by action or inaction, whether we stand with and for the most disadvantaged among us, recognize and respect their struggle to preserve a tenure-validated place for their community and their tolerance and advocacy for the socially dispossessed. Or we stand with the unsustainable culture of market-shaped consumerists whose anticipated lust for stainless steel appliances and granite countertops and high-rise cubicles to put them in will only produce greater wealth for the already excessively advantaged. If we are, just one more moment. Should we choose to reflect on these ideas of the great thinkers who propose the best ways to respond to the needs of socially or economically disadvantaged and the values that simplicity, poverty, and tolerance offer to teach each of us, I respectfully suggest Jesus or the Buddha rather than Donald Trump or a Vancouver facsimile. Is there any place for the low-income and otherwise socially challenged in a city often reputed to be among the best places to live in the world? Is the wider community willing to help preserve a unique, although flawed, sanctuary for its most disadvantaged citizens? Are we willing to respect and honor citizens with minimal resources who resist potentially overwhelming interconnected economic power that is threatening the only center of gravity for the organization of the poor and the disadvantaged?
Mr. Hathaway, you got to wrap up. Thank you very much for coming to speak. And next up...
A volunteer-run independent bookstore in the downtown east side. We've been there since 1973, which was longer than I've been alive. As far as I know, we are the longest-running volunteer-run independent bookstore in Western Canada, and I think that also makes us one of the oldest businesses in the downtown east side. And I'd just like to point out that just because you draw lines on a map doesn't mean that Chinatown is magically no longer part of the downtown east side. It is. So I just want to be here to speak on behalf of a business that's opposed to higher buildings in Chinatown, and I want to tell you a little bit about why. One of the things that came up the last of these hearings that really bothered me that I wanted to speak to was the idea that just because the SRO buildings are owned by family associations that aren't likely to knock the buildings down, somehow that isn't going to affect people. Spartacus Books has been in the downtown east side since 1973, and we were at the Candy and Hastings block for almost all of that time. Our building burned down, and we rebuilt ourselves with the support of the community. Like, we're a nonprofit organization of the non-nonprofit. We got no funding. We are completely run by volunteers. And we always have been, and we managed to rebuild ourselves because of the support of the community in the neighborhood. 3 years ago, we had to move from the block where we've been since the store started. Not because our building got knocked down, because of all the condo buildings that were going up around us. Because our rent increased, because the speculation increased the property taxes that our landlord was paying, and like most commercial leases, you pay a chunk of the property taxes as part of your commercial lease. You pay the expenses on the building as part of your commercial lease. So even though your actual rent might not go up, the cost of your lease goes up. And so we had to move. We're now in Strathcona over at 684 East Hastings, and we love our new location and we love the community, and we're still part of the downtown east side, and that's really important to us. But it wasn't because our building got knocked down that we were forced to move. It was because the buildings going up around us made it so expensive that we could not keep our doors open. We couldn't do business in the neighborhood where we've been for almost 40 years. Not because our building got knocked down, but because of things getting more expensive around us. Ours is a volunteer-run business. Nobody's trying to make a living. Nobody's trying to feed their families on working at Spartacus. We work there because we love it, because we love the community, because we feel safe there, because it's a vibrant, powerful, passionate community where we feel comfortable and safe and we love being there. We're not trying to feed our families. I can't even imagine what it must be like for people who are running businesses who are trying to feed their families and support themselves on a business where they're looking at new buildings going up around them that's going to make it more expensive to do business. And that means that the businesses that are there, I agree with a lot of the folks in the Downtown Eastside Neighborhood Council who say that the businesses that serve low-income people are going to disappear.
Hear, hear.
It's happening. It's happening all over the neighborhood. Anyone who thinks that isn't happening, come with me. I live at Main and King Edward. I ride my bike through the whole neighborhood to get to the store, to go to work at the store. Come with me. I challenge you. See the way it's changing. It's happening. Don't fool yourselves. Whatever it says on paper, that it won't happen, that the businesses that serve low-income people won't disappear, they will disappear. It's happening. It's already happening. So I just wanted to also say that I have been out pounding the pavement with the Downtown Eastside Neighborhood Council, getting people to sign petitions, talking to people about this issue since it started coming up. And I've been specifically going and talking to businesses. That's what I agreed to do. Because I say, you know, we're a business at Spartacus. That's what we care about, is other people who do business in the neighborhood, because that's what we do. So I went and talked to businesses. I also talked to residents. I talked to just people on the street. I did not talk to a single person that knew this was happening. Not just residents, but businesses too. So I challenge the folks that say there's been a comprehensive community consultation process. Not according to anybody that I've talked to.
Hear, hear.
And I spent days out there talking to people. So those are the stories that I wanted to share with you. I don't imagine that folks on council come down to the downtown east side very much. I do, even though I don't live there. And so I just wanted to share some of those stories with you, because those are the people's lives and the ways that this decision is going to affect people's lives. So whatever it says on paper and whatever studies you have and maps and all of that, you guys have lots of numbers and information and stuff, but there's also people's real lives, and I encourage you to remember that. Thanks.
Thank you, and next up.
Now, some argue that increasing heights and density in Chinatown will bring benefits, gifts to the community that now resides within the boundaries. By consenting to more condo towers, the neighborhood will acquire the necessary resources to preserve the historic heritage of the area. More people with more wealth living in the neighborhood will translate into a revitalization of local businesses and a more vibrant street life. But in my view, These imagined positive outcomes of massive development are just another manifestation of the Trojan horse strategy. Hidden within the luring promises of revitalization and community benefits are the shock troops of gentrification that threaten the majority low-income residents and small businesses of Chinatown with massive displacement. Now, gentrification not only forces people out of the neighborhood through increasing land values and higher rents, it also produces a kind of internal displacement for low-income residents by creating zones of exclusion.
Zoe.
Zones of exclusion are spaces where people are unable to enter because they lack the necessary economic means for participation. As wealthier people move into the neighborhood, more spaces are devoted to offering amenities that cater to them. Grocery stores, banks, coffee shops, restaurants, salons, various retail stores, nightclubs, stylish pubs, etc. begin to appear throughout the neighborhood and are priced beyond what people on fixed low income can afford. V6A, Ginger, the London Pub, the Kiefer Bar, Fortune Sound Club, Storm Salon, where you get a haircut for $50, Rennie's Gallery, the Vancouver Film School, where you can do a one-year program in game design for $32,000, and the Everything Cafe, and many more to be found in the booklet that was given to you at our last meeting. But there's another sense in which these places are zones of exclusion, because whenever land is used to build condos or develop businesses for wealthier people, it can no longer be incorporated into a vision for the neighborhood determined by the majority low-income community. Gentrifying developments exclude space on which a local resident-based plan could be grounded. And zones of exclusion also become sites that are marked by increased surveillance and policing. Strategies of control and punishment are implemented at these sites in order to protect them from the presence of unwanted people and from potential disruption. Only those with status, privilege, and wealth can enter. All others are watched, carefully monitored, interrogated, and criminalized. So, as gentrification produces more and more zones of exclusion, low-income residents become alienated from their own community. It's the experience of internal displacement, the feeling of being out of place in one's own neighborhood. So, in keeping with the warning of the Trojan priest, we should not trust city planners, large developers, or wealthy investors who promise elusive benefits, gifts. Revitalization through higher condo towers may contain within itself the destruction of the very community that it purports to revitalize. Thank you.